The ring hit the floor before anyone said a word. It made a small, bright sound against the marble, the kind of sound that carries in a quiet room, and Nessa watched it roll in a slow, wobbling circle until it stopped at the foot of the altar. Nobody moved to pick it up, not even her. 342 people were in that ballroom. She had counted the RSVPs herself. Because that was the kind of thing Nessa did. She managed the numbers. She always had. The seating chart, the catering invoice, the insurance policy on the venue. She had built the entire evening from a spreadsheet, line by line, the way she built everything in her life since she was 16, and her mother handed her the household ledger and said, "You're better at this than I am, just keep us afloat." Nessa had kept things afloat for 29 years. She was good at it. She was not good at standing in a borrowed dress in front of 342 people, while her fiancé's hand slipped out of hers and he said very quietly, "I can't do this." The words didn't land right away. They came in through her ears and stayed there, floating somewhere between sound and meaning, while the string quartet in the corner went still and the champagne tower behind her caught the light in long amber columns, and her maid of honor, her cousin Jade, made a sound like a door being shut too fast. "I can't do this, Nessa." He said her name like an apology. Like if he used her name, it became something gentler. Dominic Hale was 34 years old, the third son of a real estate family from Oakville, and he had been, for 2 years and 8 months, the person she was most sure of. She had been wrong about money before, about which invoices would clear, about which suppliers would default. She had been wrong about her landlord, about her car, about a dozen small bets she made with herself about how the world worked. But she had not thought she was wrong about this. He wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking just past her left ear, at something or someone she couldn't see, and that was when Nessa understood it wasn't just about the words. The dress she was wearing wasn't hers. She'd borrowed it from her cousin because she couldn't afford the alterations on her own. The venue was his family's. The champagne, the flowers, the 4-piece string quartet, all of it was his family's money, which she had organized and scheduled and negotiated down by 11%, because that was what she did. She was standing in the middle of someone else's everything, and the person who had invited her here had just quietly stepped back. "I've been seeing someone," he said, still not looking at her, "for about 8 months. The number landed differently than the words had. 8 months. She had a copy of their joint account statement in her email from 8 months ago. She had receipts from 8 months ago. Her brain, which never fully stopped running calculations, was already doing the overlap. The weekends he said he was with his brother in Montreal. The conference in Vancouver she hadn't gone to because someone needed to stay and deal with the plumbing issue in the apartment. She had fixed the plumbing. He had been in Vancouver. She turned around slowly, not because she wanted to face the room, but because something in her body decided that standing with her back to 342 people was no longer acceptable. When she turned, she saw Jade with both hands pressed to her mouth. She saw Dominic's mother in the front row, with an expression that wasn't surprise. She saw the servers frozen along the back wall, trays held level out of pure professional instinct. She saw the man standing near the east exit. He was not part of the evening. She knew that the way you know when a line item doesn't belong in a column, it sat wrong, it threw off the balance. He was standing slightly apart from the nearest cluster of guests, not trying to blend in, not trying to leave, just present in the specific settled way of someone who had decided where they were going to be, and saw no reason to explain it. He wore a dark suit, no tie, the collar open by one button. He was older than most of the men in the room. His face was not a kind face, but it was a very still one, and the stillness was worse than anything else about it. He was watching her, not the way the other guests were watching her, with the sideways, horrified attention of people witnessing an accident. He was watching her the way you watch something you've been expecting. She looked away. She looked back at Dominic, who was now accepting a hand on his shoulder from his father, and she understood in a very simple, flat way that the script for this evening had been rewritten by everyone except her, that she was the last person in the room to find out the ending. She picked up her clutch from the table beside the altar. It had her phone in it, and her emergency transit card, and $40 in cash, a habit from the years when $40 was the margin between making it through a week and not. She walked toward the east exit because it was the closest one, and because it was away from the Hale family, and she was almost to the door when the man in the dark suit stepped into her path, not aggressively. Just, "There, Mrs. Okafor," he said. She stopped. He knew her name, which meant he had done some kind of preparation for this moment, which meant this moment had been planned. Her mind filed that information in a column labeled things I don't understand yet and kept moving. "I don't know you?" she said. "No." He didn't seem bothered by this. "My name is Varro. I'm here because I have a proposal for you, and tonight seemed like the appropriate time to make it. You picked tonight on purpose. I was aware this would be tonight. Yes." The string quartet had started playing again. Something wrong, something too cheerful for the room, and she could hear the shift in the crowd noise as people turned back to their champagne and began the process of converting what they had witnessed into a story they could tell later. In 20 minutes, Dominic would be back at his father's side, and Nessa would have ceased to exist as far as this evening was concerned. "I have a car outside," Varro said. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to hear what I have to say, and if I say no..." He looked at her without any particular urgency. "Then you walk out that door and find a way home, and you don't hear from me again." She looked at the door. She looked at the room behind her, where the Hale family was beginning to redistribute itself, absorbing the disruption back into the fabric of the evening with the practiced ease of people who had always had enough money to do exactly that. She walked through the door. The car was a black SUV idling on Harbor Street. A driver she didn't look at, leather seats, the quiet hum of good climate control, and the particular smell of a vehicle that gets cleaned professionally. Nessa sat with her clutch in her lap, and her spine very straight, and waited. Varro sat across from her. He had a way of occupying space that didn't take up more than he needed, which she noticed because it was unusual in men who had money. Men with money tended to spread. "You work in financial forensics," he said. "You've been with the same mid-size firm for 4 years. Before that, 2 years at a larger firm where you identified an internal fraud scheme worth $3.4 million and brought it to your supervisor, who took credit for the finding, which is why you left." She kept her face still. "You've done research. I research things I'm considering investing in. I'm not something you invest in. I disagree." He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and produced a document. 3 pages, folded once, clean edges. He set it on the seat between them without offering it to her. "I run several businesses. Some of them have financial irregularities that I haven't been able to locate. I need someone with your particular skill set, not to fix them, to find them. Specifically, to find who is responsible." Nessa looked at the document but didn't touch it. "You can hire any forensic accountant for that. I've had 3. 2 of them found nothing. 1 found something, and then stopped finding things very quickly." The way he said it was not a threat. It was just a fact, which was almost more unsettling. "What happened to the 3rd one?" "He's fine. He's in Kelowna. He just became very interested in retirement." A pause. "He was 63. She almost smiled. She didn't. "What do you actually need?" "Someone who will look at my books the way you looked at the accounts at your old firm. Someone who isn't afraid of what they'll find. And someone who has a reason to stay." "A reason?" "I'm aware that your current situation involves a lease that ends in 6 weeks. A position at your firm that has become untenable since your supervisor promoted the junior analyst you trained over you last month, and approximately $11,000 in credit card debt that is not yours, but is currently in your name." He said all of this the same way she might read a balance sheet, not unkindly, but without softening it. "I'm offering you employment at a rate that resolves those problems, a place to stay while the work is ongoing, and at the end of 12 months, a severance that means you never have to take a job because you need it again." Nessa was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, Toronto's waterfront moved past in slow light. "You know a lot about my finances," she said. "I know a lot about most things. That's not reassuring. It wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be accurate. She picked up the document, 3 pages. It was not a vague agreement. It was specific, clause by clause, the kind of contract that someone had put real hours into drafting. Scope of work, compensation structure, confidentiality terms that ran in both directions, which she noted. Exit conditions. This is 12 months, she said. Yes, and after 12 months? After 12 months, regardless of what I find, we're done. You take what I owe you and you go. He met her eyes. His were grey-green, the color of Lake Ontario on a cloudy morning, and very direct. I don't make open-ended arrangements. I find they get complicated. Nessa thought about the ballroom she had just left, about Dominic's father's hand on Dominic's shoulder, the casual absorption of her humiliation into the Hale family narrative. She thought about going back to her apartment tonight, to the single closet and the kitchen with the broken third burner that the landlord had promised to fix 4 months ago. She thought about the $11,000 of credit card debt that wasn't hers, accumulated over 8 months. She could see it now, the purchases she had filed under Dominic's miscellaneous, the dinners, the hotel stays, the flights to Vancouver. She thought about the look on Varro's face when he said tonight seemed like the appropriate time. You knew about the engagement, she said, before tonight. Yes, and you knew it was going to end this way. A slight pause. I knew it was possible. You waited to see which way it would fall. He didn't answer, which was its own answer. She looked down at the contract. I want to add a clause, she said. Which one? If I find what you're looking for and it implicates someone in your organization above a certain level. I mean, someone you didn't expect. I want the right to take that information to a third party of my choosing. Not law enforcement necessarily, just someone outside your structure. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he was going to say no. Define third party of your choosing, an auditor, a regulator, someone with standing, not a journalist, not a competitor. Another pause. If the information directly endangers my operation, I'd need to be informed first. You'd be informed. You just wouldn't have veto power over what I do with it. He looked at her for a moment with something in his face that wasn't quite surprise, but was adjacent to it, the expression of someone recalibrating a number they had been confident in. All right, he said. She folded the contract back along its crease and put it in her clutch. I'll have my own version drafted by Friday. If your lawyers can respond by Monday, we can start the following week. You don't have a lawyer. I'll find one. The SUV slowed. They were stopped on a street she didn't recognize, somewhere north of the waterfront. Varro reached forward and tapped the partition and the door unlocked. There's a hotel 2 blocks east, he said. I've taken a room in your name. Tonight only. After that, the contract will cover your arrangements. I haven't signed anything yet. No. He looked at her. But you will. She got out of the car. The night was cold in the way that April in Toronto is always cold, a stubborn, wet cold that doesn't believe spring has been earned yet. She stood on the sidewalk and heard the SUV pull away behind her and did not watch it go. She did not go to the hotel right away. She stood on the corner for a while with her clutch under her arm and ran the numbers in her head. Not because she didn't already know what she was going to do, but because running numbers was the way she steadied herself. $11,000. 6 weeks on the lease. A supervisor who had taken credit for her work twice now and would do it a third time if she let him. A career she had built so carefully, so methodically, and which had produced, so far, other people's success and her own continued precarity. And a contract in a purse that was, she had to admit, very well drafted. She walked east. The offices were in a building on Adelaide Street that looked like any other mid-century commercial building. Slate facade, clean windows, a lobby with a security desk that had 2 men behind it, who were too large and too still to be standard building security. Nessa arrived at 8:45 on a Monday morning, wearing a blazer she had pressed herself and carrying a leather portfolio she had owned since articling school. She was shown to the 14th floor. The space was not what she expected. She had built an image in her head over the weekend, dark wood, excess, the visual grammar of intimidation. What she found was something closer to a very serious accounting firm. Long tables, multiple monitors, the quiet clicking of keyboards. People who looked up briefly when she walked through and then looked back at their screens. A woman named Anais walked her to a corner office and said, "Mr. Varro's instructions were that you'd need full access to the subsidiary ledgers. I'll set you up with credentials this morning." "Thank you," Nessa said. He also said if you had questions about the filing structure to ask him directly. "I'll start with the ledgers." Anais looked at her with a small, appraising expression. "Most people ask about the filing structure first. Most people get distracted by the structure. I want to see the numbers." The credentials came through by 9:15. Nessa opened the first ledger file, put her reading glasses on, and got to work. She found the first irregularity on day 4. It was small. A vendor payment routed through a subsidiary that had no operational connection to the service being billed. The kind of thing that appeared, on the surface, like sloppy bookkeeping. She flagged it in her notes and kept going. The second irregularity appeared on day 7. Different subsidiary, different vendor, but the same routing structure and a payment date that fell within 48 hours of the first. By day 12, she had 9 of them. They weren't random. They had a pattern, not the obvious, hurried pattern of someone who thought they wouldn't be caught, but the careful, measured pattern of someone who was very confident they had covered their tracks. The routing through subsidiaries, the vendor names that were real businesses with real histories, the timing that distributed the payments across quarters to avoid triggering automated flags. Whoever was doing this was good, better than the previous forensic accountants, if they hadn't found it, or they had found it and decided they didn't want to know more. On day 13 she was working late. The floor had emptied around her, the overhead lights cycling down to half power, and she was cross-referencing a payment from 11 months ago against a vendor registration when Varro appeared in the doorway of her office. She had not heard the elevator. She had not heard the door. He was simply there, the way he had been at the ballroom, present, already decided. "You've found something," he said. It wasn't a question. "How do you know? You've been here until 9 every night except last Wednesday, when you left at 6:30. Tonight you're still here at 10. That's a pattern." He came into the office and looked at the monitor, not at her notes, which she had printed, and which were in a folder she had placed face down on the secondary desk, professionally careful. He didn't try to look at them. "How many?" 9 confirmed. "Possibly 11. I need another 3 days to verify the last 2. He pulled a chair from the secondary desk and sat down, which surprised her slightly. She had expected him to stay standing. He sat the way he did everything without wasting the motion. "Walk me through one of them," he said. She turned her monitor to face him and pulled up the clearest example. A payment to a logistics company in Brampton, routed through a holding subsidiary that existed for a completely different purpose, paid on a Tuesday in October for a service dated the previous July. She took him through it the way she would take a client through a finding, factual, chronological, no editorial comment. He listened without interrupting. His face did not change, but something behind it did. A small, controlled tightening around the eyes that she would have missed if she hadn't been watching for it. "You recognize the company," she said. It was not quite a question. "I recognize the subsidiary it was routed through." A pause. "It shouldn't have access to that account. Who controls it?" He was quiet for a moment. "Someone who's been with this organization for 9 years." She waited. "Someone I trusted with the restructuring in 2021, he said. The words came out carefully, the way you say something you've known for 3 days, but haven't said aloud yet. Nessa looked at the screen. "The pattern starts in March 2023, 2 years ago." "Yes, so after the restructuring, yes." He exhaled through his nose, not quite a sigh, more like a recalculation. They would have had the access. After 2021, they would have had all the access they needed. She thought about her clause, the one about third parties. She thought about the fact that she was sitting in an office on Adelaide Street at 10 o'clock at night, with a man who ran something she had deliberately not asked him to define too precisely, and that the information in her folder was the kind of information that could be extremely useful to several parties. "What do you want to do with it?" she said. "I want to see all of it first." His voice was level. "All 9, all the verification on the remaining 2. I'll have it by Thursday." "Thursday," he said. He stood. He was almost to the door when she said Varro. He turned. "The person," she said. "When I give you the complete file, are you going to do something I'm going to need to think hard about?" He looked at her for a moment. His face in the half-light was harder to read than it was in full daylight. The planes of it shifted. The stillness became something more like density, like mass. "I'm going to do what the situation requires," he said. "I'm not going to tell you more than that. That's what I thought." She turned back to her monitor. Thursday. She found the 11th irregularity on Wednesday. It was the largest one, not the most recent, but the largest in dollar value, and the routing was different from the others. More direct, sloppier, like whoever had done it had been in a hurry, or like they'd been testing what they could get away with before developing the more careful system that the other 10 represented. She sat with that for a while. A test run. Done before the careful ones. Done when the careful ones weren't certain yet that it would work. She pulled the date and held it against the timeline she'd been building in her head. February 2023. 4 weeks before the pattern properly started. She started checking who had been in the office that week. It took her 2 hours working through administrative records that she was only able to access because Varro had given her credentials that were, she was beginning to understand, broader than most people in this building probably had. He had given her those credentials on day 1 without her asking. She sat with that too. On Thursday morning she printed the complete report. 11 confirmed irregularities, total amount, routing structure, timeline, and 1 additional page that she had added the previous night. She put it all in the leather portfolio and took it to the boardroom on the 15th floor, where Varro was already sitting with coffee she hadn't been offered. She set the portfolio on the table between them and said, "Before I open this, I need to ask you something." He looked at her. "The credentials you gave me on day 1, she said. "Full subsidiary access, administrative records, personnel files. That's not normal. The previous forensic accountants, did they have the same access?" "No, why did I?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because I needed you to be able to find everything. Or," she said, "because you needed me to find it in a way that would be very hard for anyone to dispute, with a paper trail that showed how I found it, what access I used, what I looked at and when." She kept her voice even. "Because you already knew what was in there. You've known for a while. You just needed someone to find it officially." The pause this time was long. "I suspected," he said finally. "I didn't have confirmation. Did you need the confirmation for legal reasons or internal ones?" "Both." She opened the portfolio. She slid the 11 pages across the table and waited while he read them. He read the way she expected him to read. Not quickly, but completely. He turned each page fully before moving to the next. When he got to the last page, the one she had added, he stopped. "This is a name," he said. "Yes. This isn't in the ledgers." "No. It's in the administrative records. The person who was in the building during the February test run, who had subsidiary access, whose entry credentials show a pattern of after-hours access that maps exactly to the dates of the 11 payments." She folded her hands. "You can verify it independently. I'd recommend you do." He looked at the name for a long moment. "This is someone I trust," he said. "I know, different person from the 9-year one." "Yes." She waited. "There are 2 of them." The room was quiet. He set the page down. He looked at his coffee, which had gone cold, and then at her. "You could have held this back," he said. "The second name. You had what I hired you for, the 11 payments, the routing structure. You could have closed the portfolio and said, 'Here's your report,' and that would have fulfilled the contract." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" Nessa thought about that for a moment. She thought about the way she had read the pattern in the ledgers. The careful one, the test run before it, the 2 people whose timing and access converged in ways that she had stayed up until 2 in the morning to verify. She thought about what it meant that Varro had given her broad credentials, and whether that was calculation or something else, and what the difference was. "Because I'm good at this," she said, "and being good at it means telling you what I found, not what's convenient." He looked at her for a moment, with that recalibrating expression again. Then he picked up the report and began reading the second page again from the top. "I'll need 3 days," he said. "I'll be here." He came to her office on the third day. She heard him this time. She had been listening for it, had trained herself over these weeks to the specific cadence of his footsteps, and she set down her pen and waited. He sat down across from her. He had the look of someone who had done 3 days of very difficult work and had not slept for most of it, which she recognized because she knew the look from mirrors. "You were right," he said. "Both of them. I know. The situation has been resolved." She didn't ask how. "Okay." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a folded document, different from the original contract, thinner, just 1 page. He set it on the desk the same way he'd set the first contract on the car seat, without pressure. She looked at it. "The contract doesn't end for 9 more months." "I know. That's not an exit document." He was quiet for a moment. "That's an amendment." She unfolded it. It was exactly what he said, a single amendment clause, extending the scope of her work and adjusting the compensation structure upward, significantly. It also included a line she read twice. "The party of the second part shall have full authority to recommend personnel changes at the subsidiary level to the party of the first part, who will give such recommendations genuine consideration." She looked up. "This is more than forensic work. What you did over the last 3 weeks isn't what I hired 3 forensic accountants to do," he said. "The first 2 found nothing. The third found the surface and stopped. You found all of it, and then found more." He paused. "I've been trying to understand why my books keep developing problems that my people can't catch. I think the answer is that I need someone who doesn't belong to my structure, looking at my structure. That's not a comfortable position for me to be in." "No." He looked at her directly. "It's not a comfortable position for me either. I'm not accustomed to telling someone I don't fully understand yet that I want them to keep looking." She was quiet. Outside the window, Adelaide Street was doing its midday thing. Couriers, construction noise somewhere to the south, the sound of a city that did not stop for anyone's private negotiations. "The $11,000, she said. "It's paid as of this morning, and the lease situation. Sorted. There's an apartment on King West in the contract appendix." She looked at him. He looked back at her without blinking. "You sorted that before I signed anything new," she said. "You were going to sign it. She should have found that aggravating. She almost did." "You're very confident." "I'm accurate," he said. "There's a difference. I was wrong about who was stealing from me. I'm not wrong about you." She picked up the amendment. She read it again, all the way through, the way she read everything, not for the reassurance of the words but for what the structure said underneath them. 12 months remaining, expanded scope, the personnel recommendation clause, compensation that would, if she was being precise about it, change the entire axis of the next 10 years of her life. At the bottom, his signature was already there. She took a pen from her portfolio. "One more clause," she said. He waited. "If I find something that implicates you," she said. "Directly. Not your people, you. I get to walk out with the information and you don't follow me." The pause was the longest one yet. "You'd walk," he said. "I'd walk." He looked at the window. He looked back at her. "That's not a clause anyone has ever put in front of me. I'm aware. You understand that the fact that you're asking for it means you've already considered the possibility that you might find something. I consider all possibilities," she said. "That's the job." Another pause. Then, and she would think about this later in the apartment on King West, in the long, quiet evenings when she was putting the ledgers down for the night, something in his face changed. Not softened exactly, settled. "Fine," he said. She wrote the clause in the margin in her own hand. He initialed it without hesitation. She signed at the bottom. Outside, the city kept going. Inside, the numbers waited, patient as always, full of everything they hadn't told anyone yet.